Thank you for having me here. My name is Terje Laskemoen. I'm the head of department for nature and pollution at the Agency for Urban Environment in the city of Oslo. My presentation today will be about reopening rivers and streams in Oslo and how we facilitate for biodiversity or biological diversity. My background is also a biologist, and I'm quite interested in this topic about rivers and streams and the biodiversity, also in cities. The image you see here is from a big project we had a few years ago. This was probably in 2014. This was finished in 2015. And as you see here, it's a big construction site almost. But it's all about the details. So today I'll talk a little bit more about in detail what is this gravel and these rocks we see, and also the mats, coconut mats as it is, you can see on each side of this image, and also about how we try to make nature both introduce it and also want nature itself to establish in these projects. But first, I'll just show you a map. This is the inner city of Oslo, where the yellow lines are the main roads and all the white ones are small roads. And you can see there's also quite some blue areas throughout the city. But if I kind of modify this map, you'll see a lot of blue lines and also some red dotted lines. The red dotted are quite crucial here because these are the old small streams, some of them rivers even, which have been closed throughout the urbanization of the city. So Oslo used to be a really wet area with a lot of small or even large streams, but now we have quite a few of them are closed and they're underground. But today I'm going to talk more about the project of reopening and also trying to reintroduce nature in these projects. And you can see there are even a few, lila or purple lines here, which illustrate tunnels that have been made. So the streams, the original they're put into tunnels which end up in the fjord, as you can see here. But another map, again, will show you or give you an idea of the projects that have been completed or even are ongoing or projected and long-term projects for reopening. And you can see it's not far from all of the red dotted lines you saw. But these are the projects that are feasible or possible to conduct, at least in the near future. Hopefully we'll have even more projects like this in the coming years. And the stream which will be in focus today actually used to be the most closed stream in Oslo. But throughout a period of 10 to 15 years, it has become the most reopened stream. And it's, if you can see my marker cursor here, it starts in the wooden forested areas north of the city. It runs through the central parts, and it ends up in the inner fjord area, even or almost in the center of the city. And you can see quite a few projects are already completed, even more than shown on this map, because it's a bit outdated. Even this part is completed now, and there are more ongoing projects, and there are also some long-term projects to see if we can reopen this stream. And why is it important to reopen streams? I can just share a few thoughts about that. And of course, we have climate change coming. We have more precipitation, and especially we have more often heavy rains. So open waterways are quite crucial in a city to take care of all the water, at least the storm water. But other ecosystem effects from reopening streams is, of course, that we can have more nature into the city. And that will be my main focus throughout this talk. I'm not focusing so much about the stormwater management, but how we can facilitate nature to establish these projects. And first of all, it's important to just be aware of that it takes time. You have to be patient. At least in the Nordic conditions we have in Oslo and in other parts of Norway, the plants, the whole ecosystem takes time to establish. So this photo is actually from the same area I showed you on the first image. We had wetland plants and also even just masses from wetlands in other parts of Oslo that we introduced to this area, and we wanted to see if they could establish and start growing. And this was the first spring. It doesn't look very nice. The plants are small. It's a bit muddy, and you can also see some algae floating around here, but that's when it's crucial to be patient. This is the same area 2 years later, and if I'd shown you an image from 2022, last year, it would have been even more overgrown. So it actually works, but as I said, we have to be patient. These are just some points to focus on. Algae will bloom the first years, and it can even be a bit smelly because algae are pioneer species. They will start growing immediately, and they're extremely efficient in taking up nutrients and so on. And again, it's about being patient. Because for the audience or the people living in the city, they will be a bit disappointed because this doesn't look very nice, and as I said, it could be smelly. But if we are patient and the ecosystem gets its time, it will stabilize. And another thing is about fish in all streams, or all a bit bigger streams in Oslo at least, we have fish because they naturally live in the forested areas outside the city, and they will actually establish naturally. They will migrate down from the forested areas through the streams. So it's important to ensure that we don't make any barriers for them. And also all the benthic animals, the insects and so on, they will establish naturally. And this is actually a big point for us. We don't want to introduce them artificially. So we don't fish and move them into the streams. We want them to come by themselves. And of course, all these benthic animals, the insects, they can fly or they can migrate through the waterways, but they will also establish by themselves or naturally. But then again, it's important to kind of project and to make these streams livable. So make livable habitat for the animals that we know will establish by itself. So that's why I put up this point about not constructing any artificial thresholds or constructions that will make it hard for the aquatic life to migrate in these streams. And another point, my last point here, is that all kinds of water bodies with ponds and streams will attract bird life, and we want that, and it's important to be aware of it. But if people start feeding birds excessively, we might get a problem. One problem is, of course, that they can actually, it can be pollution. If you have a big or large flocks of waterfowl being fed with the bread, for instance, it will pollute the water. And another point is that it's not good for the birds even. They can find their own food, and there is excessive food sources in these systems without being fed with bread. But of course, this is quite difficult to communicate to the public. because it is, I know, for instance, it's nice to feed birds. It's a family. It's even well, you can see families coming to these areas and for feeding the birds. But we have to try and communicate this, and we can't fully ban it or tell that it's illegal. But we try to inform and tell people that okay, small portions of feeding is maybe okay, but don't excess it, don't overfeed, because then we get into troubles by even polluting the water. A little bit more about how to construct these streams, or construct. I'll keep calling it that, because we want it to be. We never or rarely get down to the original stream, because of the urbanization and the buildup of the city. The original stream is maybe everything from 2 to 10 meters below ground because of the buildup. So we have to, in most projects, construct a semi-natural stream on top of this. And then it's important to what kind of substrate should we use. We try to use gravel, rocks, mud that is naturally occurring in waterways in our area. And you can see on the left image here how it looks from the very beginning. But then after a few years, if things are going as we want, we can have areas as you see in the right image here. And I'll get back to that, but we really try to keep a close overview of what kind of plant species are introduced or planted in these areas, because we want it to be native plants occurring naturally in our area and really try to avoid all invasive species. And I guess you know from your country as well that invasive species is a big challenge. And we also have that in Oslo. A little bit more about construction. This is from the really urbanized areas. You can see there are buildings close to this, to the area where the stream will be established. And you can also see how we have to make these kind of waterproof, because we are building higher or at a higher level than the natural stream is used to be 100 years ago. It has to be to keep the water in the stream. It has to be tight with a membrane underneath. But then on top of this membrane, we put in rocks, we put in gravel, and we also on this left image you see these mats, which are made from coconut scraps. Actually, they are used for establishing the plants. They will, for the first 5 to 10 years, they will keep the plants and the roots on their place, but then they will be kind of made to dirt. They will disappear. And then on the right image here is you can see an area where the stream is quite steep, so you have to make this kind of artificial thresholds, which I earlier said that we should avoid. But if we make them, we should make sure that fish can migrate both downstream and upstream. There will be some more images of that later. A bit more details here, and even with some Norwegian, I can see. The left one is under construction, and the right one is finished or finished project. But you can see, if you look into the details here, you'll see we even put in fish hides like this, because this is areas where there are lots of people walking by and lots of noise and so on. So the fish should have some hiding places. And as I said earlier, this is from a really urbanized area. And what we see is that people living here, they're kind of well, it's hard to accept at the very beginning when you have a lot of construction ongoing and so on, a lot of noise, of course. But when you have this finished streams, they are really loving it. And that's also quite helpful for us, because then people will help us take care of it. So tell if you have a litter or stuff like that polluting the streams, and they also give us messages about, oh, I saw a fish, or I saw this and this kind of bird, and that's really nice, a nice part of it. And again, the plants at the edges here, as I said, the edge zone from the land to the stream, we try to introduce natural wetland plants, and we have to make quite a few measures for avoiding the invasive species. Sometimes we also have to go back into the stream to actually move rocks and to ensure that fish can migrate here. This is from the same stream I used to or showed you the first image. And in this particular area, just beside where I'm standing in the stream here, we have now brown trout spawning every year. So we have this kind of small waterfalls, but we have made sure that we have gravel with the right size. So this has become one of the best spawning areas actually in this stream. That's quite nice to see. Just a few more examples. This one you saw earlier. This is from probably the most urban area. This is close to a road, and you have a sidewalk pavement on the left side, and there was no space for green areas in the edge zone at all. So we had to put the green down into the stream like this. But what we want ideally is to have areas like this. We have quite broad areas with green wetland plants on each side of the stream, and the stream running freely through that area. But of course, that's a trade-off in dense urbanized areas. So we're kind of fighting for the space at first, and then we have to work with what we get. And sometimes it's not a lot of space. Other times we have more space. But what I started out with, we have this natural establishment of wildlife. Is it amphibians or insects or fish? They will actually establish by themselves. I could have shown a lot of examples of typical insects, of course, but there was no time for that. But in Norway, at least, some of these dragonflies, these are the red Sympetrum species. They are red listed and endangered, and we have them in quite a few of these areas. We also have newts, even though the newts don't go too well together with trout, because the trout will eat most of them. But for the newts, we sometimes try to establish ponds which are not linked to these waterways, so that they are without fish for the amphibians. And of course, there's a lot of waterfowl establishing in these areas. So that's what we, and I didn't tell you that at the very beginning, but our main goal when we reopen rivers and streams is that we make the habitat suitable for brown trout. So if we see that the brown trout establish and thrive there, we can make that as a measure of have we achieved what our goal really was. Sometimes reopening is not an option. And then we also, I just wanted to add this, because we also do quite a few other measures. This is a culvert. On top of this culvert, there is a big pipeline for both drinking water and wastewater. So there was no option to remove the culvert and just reopen the stream. Ideally, that was what we wanted to do, but we found out this was impossible. Too expensive to move these big wastewater and drinking water pipelines. So we had to think about other solutions for making the fish able to migrate through this culvert. And in this instance, we have used these baffles, as they're called. These are quite interesting because they as you can see on the lower right image, they make kind of thresholds or a fish ladder so that the fish can just easily jump up and migrate through. But if we have a flood and you have big rocks or logs running through this culvert, they are flexible, so they will actually lie down and let this debris just flow away, and they'll rise up again. So it's actually a flexible fish ladder. And quite interesting, when we did this particular project, we saw the next day that the fish had migrated and they were actually jumping up through this fish ladder. So that's also nice. Another kind of measure is to fill up with both gravel and big rocks in some of the streams. And this is a type of measure that shouldn't be necessary actually, because we are doing it in the streams and rivers that are not closed. But being a city, you have a lot of fine debris finding its way and sediment finding its way to the streams. And this will kind of make the habitat unsuitable, or at least less suitable for the aquatic life. So, and this is a quite cheap measure. It doesn't cost that much, but by planning and projecting in a quick or quite easy way, you can make the habitat a lot better. So you can see from the left image we have some big rocks that are placed at strategic places to make hiding places for the fish and benthic animals, crayfish, and so on. We also have these bags with gravel, which are introduced into the stream to make spawning grounds for fish. In the last image here, we'll see in some cases we just pile up this gravel and let the stream do the job. So the next flood will probably move some of this gravel further downstream, and it will establish in places where you can get spawning grounds for the fish. Well, so this was just a few examples of how we both make measures in the reopening projects, and also with some additional few examples of how we do different kind of measures for aquatic life in the rivers and streams in Oslo. This is the last image. This is also from the very first year in one of these reopening projects. And I also want to point out that these areas are really densely planted from the very beginning. And one thing is, of course, the biodiversity, which I've been talking about today. But another point here was that we wanted this stream to be a natural cleaning system. So we want it to be really dense, to take up excessive nutrients, which we have in all waterways through a city. And then maybe in a period, or after a period of 10 to 15 years, we'll try to go in and cut down some of these green areas and in that way take out excessive nutrients. But as you can see, naturally, the mallards, the ducks here, they love these areas. We have coots, we have moorhens, we have a lot of bird life being attracted to these areas. And also the people, as I said earlier, they really thrive. And as I guess all of us know, blue and green areas are attractive and also good for public health. So that's why it's so nice working with these kind of projects. But thank you for your attention.